morning, folks. Welcome to another edition of Now You Know. This is Chris Perkins, and today we have a familiar face, at least from 3 years ago,
Right.
pre-pandemic.
Pre-pandemic. Yeah.
We have Mike Walker, and Mike, we were intending pre-pandemic to have you on every year with an updated travel show.
Right.
And our version of the Travel Channel
Right,
here.
yeah.
And unfortunately the pandemic got in the way and delayed some of your trips. And actually today we're going to be talking about a trip to Norway, which was pre-pandemic, went back to 2019,
Yeah.
and in the future we'll be doing 2022 on, I
Right,
think, for shows. So anyways, Mike, tell us what's been going on.
Well, we have traveled, as you mentioned, during the pandemic. We didn't travel that first year, but then last fall we took a trip to the Midwest for 7,000 miles, and we took one this year also to Newfoundland this June. But and so we're planning again, and what we're concentrating on recently, of course, the United States and the national parks. But this year, 2019, which we're kind of going back to, is we had gone to New Zealand, and then what this trip originated from, when I retired in 2017, the first exchange student I ever had, Øystein Jacobsen, I had seen his name on Facebook, and I said, "Are you the same Øystein Jacobsen that I had in class?" He goes, "Yes." So as we got going back and forth, he says, "Well, when are you coming to Norway?" And so we decided in 2019 to visit him, and he mentioned, he said a great time to come would be Constitution Day, which we'll be talking about the first part of this segment, because it was a magical day, and visiting him was a lot of fun. So that's why we went to Norway, to see him, but also to also see parts of the country.
And the Constitution actually goes back to 1814.
Yes.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
1814 is when it became the official kingdom after the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be ceded to Sweden, so they had this. They were able to remain a monarchy and stay as Norway. And so that's it. That's why they go back to call it the Constitution Day, the 17th of May. So that's what they celebrate. It's sort of like our 4th of July, but it was pretty neat, other things they do on that day.
Now, kind of like England, they have a king.
Yep.
And my Wikipedia research said it was Harold V.
Yep.
And they also have a prime minister.
Right.
And I've forgotten his name.
I don't know either.
But they do have a prime minister over there, so it's a monarchy.
Yes, a monarchy. It's similar to England, but then they have the three branches of government.
And it's a pretty steady government.
Yeah. But it's made up of a different party. My understanding, like 7 different coalitions, like a lot of the
British are kind of, we've been watching a lot about the British here
right.
lately.
We have a 2-party system for the most part, and but in there I think they have like 7 different parties, and of course they build coalitions, and who gains power. So
yeah. And it sounds, and I don't want to take up too much time because you've got a lot of slides to show us here this morning, but it sounds like a very prosperous country too.
Yeah, very much so. When they discovered oil in the 70s, a huge oil deposit in Norway, of course, as you can imagine, all the oil companies wanted to drill, and Norway said, "Well, this is kind of the price of what we said," and some said, "No, no thanks," but then they came back, and so yeah, it is very prosperous. The educational system, the people there are highly educated. There's about 4.5 million people, so it's when you think of Norway, it's a very long country, as for the first slide will show. And believe it or not, the coastline is 60,000 miles long. It's stretched out. Like Maine, we talk about, is 3,000 miles long if you took the islands and the inlets, etc. Norway is 66,000 miles if you stretch that out.
Which is pretty amazing. So I would say fishing would be a big part of their industry as well.
Yeah. Fishing, oil, minerals. Tourism is big too. But it's highly educated country. Very good school system, and and most of the people speak English also. I mean, Øystein, my friend, speaks very good English. And even when he came over, he was 18 years old. I was 22 when we first met. It was my first year teaching. Erskine was 18, I was 22, but
Yeah.
he was, he was a great kid in school, and we just had, you click with kids, and he was one of those kids that just the school embraced, and he stayed with a Ray Finley family.
Oh,
Finley
yes,
Mullen.
yes, of course, yeah.
Ray Finley, and so he had a great year here, but he's quite an adventurer, and so we visit him.
And you mentioned the language, him speaking pretty fluent English. That seems to be pretty common with a lot of the Europeans, being small countries and really interconnected.
Yeah.
I remember one time when I went over there and I was talking to some people, I had somebody that in college was taking, I think, 5 different languages at one time. And my God, I haven't mastered English yet, much less all the other languages.
I had a student from the Netherlands who spoke 5 languages and was fluent. Her mother was German. Father was Dutch. She spoke, Flemish. She spoke in Latin, but she didn't speak Latin, but she knew Latin. She was just a really, and her English was so colloquial too. It was just amazing, So I think Europeans, even in Germany, it's very mandatory if you're going on to the professions, to know English, and so their English usually is excellent.
One other quick thing that I noticed over there is, and this is similar to England as well, the climate is influenced by the Gulf Stream.
Absolutely.
And here they are, and I think your trip started near Bergen, right?
Yeah.
Or in Bergen.
In Bergen, yeah.
In Bergen.
Yeah.
And you're talking about somewhere near the 60th parallel, and here we are in Madison, Skowhegan area, and we're like the 44th or something like that. Those guys are more temperate than we are.
Yeah. In Bergen, I was shocked. Because I was talking to Erskine, and I called him Hinky because Hinky he had an accident, so he was hobbling. So that was Hinken in German is to hobble. And so I always call him Hinky, but now he's Erskine. He's grown up. But anyway, Erskine. We were talking about snow, and he goes, well, it doesn't snow a lot because, like you mentioned, it's temperate, but their average winter temperature there is 42 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
And the low is about 29, so it really is quite mild, considering, as you mentioned, even north of England, in Ireland.
Yeah. We'd probably take that.
We would take that, yes.
Yeah.
But it really, as you mentioned, because of the Gulf Stream. When you get up in northern Norway, above the Arctic Circle, then it's probably a little bit more comparable to me, probably colder too. But it really is amazing.
Yeah. Well, we can talk all day about that stuff, but let's launch right into the beautiful scenery you're going to be showing us.
Okay. Yeah, and what I wanted to show, people, is just you have here a map of Norway. Because most people know Norway, but it's a very long country. As we mentioned, the coast, it borders on Russia up here in the north.
Yeah.
And what we concentrated on, just to let people know, is we live in Bergen, which is in this area here, and we did a cruise up to Trondheim, which is in here. But then when we came back, we traveled inland and went up to the mountains, visited some fjords, etc. So we primarily traveled in this area here. Okay. So we didn't travel north because some people go later in the year to see the midnight sun, and some people travel wintertime to see the northern lights.
Right.
So that would be a wonderful trip too, and of course we went for skiing, etc. So this is where we were, and later I'll talk about our boat tour, and this is the area from Bergen, and these are some of the stops we made to Elesund, and I'll just pictures there, and we stopped here at night, and then overnight we slept, and we landed in Trondheim, and where we had to change ships. And the Lofoten we had, as we understood, was at the maiden voyage, but I think it's still in service. So
how large are these communities? Bergen looks like one of the bigger cities,
Bergen is surprising. It didn't feel it. It felt much more like Portland, but 250,000. It's 250,000.
Yeah.
And Oslo about 600,000. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and some of the other ones, like 70,000. And a lot of them are coastal communities, as you imagine. Some of the smaller towns we visited were inland. But a lot of your coastal towns, your bigger cities, because of the commerce,
exactly.
Oil, fishing, etc.
Exactly.
And so that was our trip. And then here is, just to show you, is we were in Bergen, and this is, as I mentioned here, and then we traveled inland. As you can see, the fjords, this is Sondheim, goes in very far. And
You
has
want to explain what fjords are for just the people that don't
fjord
know.
is well, inlets basically that
Yeah.
end here, but they go between typically mountain ranges,
Okay.
and it could be 2,000 feet, which you'll see some, and usually have an end.
Okay.
In Newfoundland, interesting enough, there was a lake fjord because it was connected at one time to the ocean. But as the glaciers melted and the land rose, it became a little freshwater lake, but it's a fjord. It was fascinating. But most of the time, fjords are carved out by the glaciers from the melting, glaciers and the snow. But the ice has carved it out, so you can see a lot of these in here are fjords, which are deep water tributaries that a lot of times 2,000-3,000 feet on either side.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, there are some pictures. I did cut down the pictures here too. I took about 500.
Oh my goodness.
And my wife too, but I didn't. There's not 500.
That would be about a 3-hour show.
That would be a 3-hour show. Yeah. So we landed in. So we arrived. This is the day before Constitution Day, which we'll talk about. And one of the things, we came out of the airport and we were waiting for Erskine to pick us up at 3 in the afternoon. We saw Bergen with a question mark, and
Yeah,
I said,
yeah.
"Why does that have a question mark?"
Yeah, right.
He said, "No one knows, but I think it was they were an art thing, and someone had a proposal, and I think it was like, well, why not Bergen? It's
Yeah.
like, so why would we come to Bergen? So it gets people talking,
Oh,
So
okay.
so we're in Bergen here, and Erskine picked us up, and he fed us that night because he was gonna show us around the city, and we met his wife and went to his apartment, and it was lovely. I mean, it was just very welcoming, and it was great to see him. Of course, we're catching up after at that time 40 plus years. Hadn't seen Erskine, and this is Erskine. He's not a young man anymore. At 18, he's 4 years younger than I am. So here I would have been probably now 68, so about 65 or so, and Erskine probably here was like 61 or so, 60 or 61. And we're out on his balcony, and but he's a character. And what's interesting is what he does is he's a photographer for street art. And he's big as far as Bergen street art, and so you have murals and things, and so that's what he does. He's also disabled. He lost a leg, part of his leg, due to a hang gliding accident long ago. So so he it is now, that's his job, is his street art.
Okay.
So what we did is Erskine picked us up, and we went to our Airbnb here, and this is in Bergen. And from there, we dropped off our things, met our host, and then Erskine picked us back up at night.
By the way, I want to give some credit to your wife, Jean, who was on these trips as well. And she's the one that pretty much set these up, right?
I call myself baby driver, in the sense that, I mean, we talk about where we want to go, what we want to do, but she's amazing as far as planning these things and, getting a lot of times free flights through points. Rooms, through Airbnb and through points and credit cards and opening. So, I mean, it looks like when we take these trips, it looks like, boy, a lot of money, but it's shocking how cheaply we do it, because really because of Jean. But she learns the systems and follows travel blogs a lot of times and gets tremendous hints. I mean, some of them are just tremendous, as far as hikes, where to go, and if you have a certain amount of days, what's a good thing to do. So and she researches, but she loves it. So.
Well, I felt that we would be remiss in leaving her out because she plays a major role.
She
in this.
plays a major role, and she's also a great photographer. So we share pictures. I take some, she takes some, but she, sometimes we may take the same image, and I'll look at hers and say, "Geez, I like that better." She's got a great eye, and I mean, I've got a good eye, but she really is a really good eye. So I used to take all the pictures, and then I noticed she was taking them. I'm thinking, "Geez, I like that one." So we share. So we pool our pictures,
Okay.
And so I do credit Jean. She's done a great job. And one of the things, we're at Airbnb, right, we took a walk, waiting for Erskine here. So we just took a walk around the neighborhood. And what you saw in Bergen were a lot of, because the elevation difference. We're in mountainous country. Bergen is a harbor, but usually a very protected harbor, and that's why I found a lot of these towns weren't exposed to the ocean as much as we might think, because especially winds and things. Rising sea levels, you would be affected, but as far as I would say like a tsunami or something like that, they do have protection because they've got you know, a lot of times outer islands, and they're protected in harbors.
Oh,
you know.
okay.
And you'll see that when we have it in the next slide. But we walked around, and you see this all over. You know, stone walls, and you know, the stairways leading up to another elevation, and you know, flora, fauna, flowers, and
Yeah.
really neat. Unfortunately, sorry about that. I have to do this sometimes, so bear
No
with
problem.
me. This is Erston, and what he does is he photographs, and I asked him, what's the difference between graffiti and street art? And you know, street art, of course, you know, you have something that I think is a picture, but I look at some of it as almost like tagging, but street art. But it's big in Bergen. We saw a lot of it, and sometimes there are almost organized murals and things. And
Okay.
sometimes they seem all over the place. But you saw things like this, they're all over the place. So he's taking this for he has a web page, you know, of
Okay.
Bergen street art, but it's a big thing. He's been interviewed on, you know, Norwegian TV and things. But you'll notice his leg too. That's the leg he lost here.
Okay, yeah.
But he gets around, and but I went out with him later. I'll show you. But it was a long day because we flew from Boston to England to Norway, and so now this is in the evening. But of course, the light lasts a long time because
You're so much farther
so
north.
much further north. Because
Yeah.
at time this is probably 9 o'clock in the evening right
Yeah.
here.
Almost
Because
full
the moon,
daylight.
yeah, the moon is coming up. But
Yeah.
so, and again, you can see all throughout Bergen, it looks very like a small town. But again, it's a town of 250 million, and excuse me, 250,000, and.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes, it is. So that night, he took us around showing different places, but he treated us to, there's a funicular and a railway like the learned from
There's
Swiss.
one up in Quebec City. too,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that you go with a little train, going backwards up to the top, and it has a almost like a little park and a place overlooking Bergen, and you can see, again, when I mentioned how protected it is. This is the inner harbor here
Yeah,
of Bergen,
yeah.
and of course, it's a pretty big area.
Yeah.
So when you say Bergen, it's not all concentrated here. It's 250,000, similar to Portland. Portland has a population of maybe 66 to 70,000, but the greater Portland area, they talk about 300,000.
That's right, metro.
400,000. So,
Yeah.
but this was taken, I checked the time stamp, this is 11:15 at night.
Wow.
So you can see the sun is setting, and it actually stayed quite light until midnight. And so we stayed up quite a bit, took pictures, just enjoying it, and we were pretty tired, but the day wasn't over yet for me.
Okay.
No. So, we went back down and we walked around. And Jean, of course, she even at home, she goes to bed much earlier than I do a lot of times. I tend to be a night owl, and so Erston said, "Do you want to come out with me?" And he goes to places. We went to this almost an old factory that they've had with. You can record music. You had artists there, so we went there, met a lot of people, and so this is. You can see it was festive, getting ready for the next day, which is Constitution Day.
What do they do? I mean, sleep schedules that time of year. Are people up really late?
I think it probably depends. I mean, you'd have to talk to individuals, but I'm sure there are people who need, like my wife, needs 8 or 9 hours of sleep, and a lot of times it seems like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, yeah.
And I should get more, but it's you can say monkey mind. But this was after midnight, so I went with Erston, and we were up on top of a building. And as I said, it was almost a large factory, and inside they had converted it to a lot of places. The artists could rent rooms, so you could do art, you could make music and record music. And people were doing that, and we met all sorts of people, and it was a lot of fun. So I took this at night. It's not as clear because I'm taking it with a my phone, but not on a timer.
Are the structures pretty narrow?
They are. These you'll see a picture later on. These are all connected, and of course, what that led to. These are all wooden buildings and more replicas because they've had several fires over the centuries. They catch fire. Typically, one catches fire.
And there goes the block.
There goes the block, and so this has been rebuilt. So these. can't remember how old exactly, but these are replicas of what was there. But there are still wooden buildings, and this is like the inner town and restaurants right there, and stores and things. But it was fascinating still.
Now, I went to Amsterdam and as part of a European trip many years ago, and the structures were very narrow
Oh, yes.
in Amsterdam. And my understanding was it's a tax reason.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
a frontage reason.
That's what I heard too.
And
Yeah.
so they would make them very, very narrow.
Yeah, and what you would notice in Amsterdam is they would have these beams like that, because you wonder how they get anything up the stairs. And that's
Yeah.
what they would do, is they would take out a window and hoist
Oh.
up furniture through the window and put it in. So, yeah, because you would see, as you mentioned in Amsterdam, through the canals especially, they were just extremely narrow
Yeah.
buildings. And but there too is like Erston's apartment was really pretty spacious, which was nice, And he did move through, and I'll show you one of the last slides. We're here, so this is still that first day. We're now into Constitution Day morning, but of course I haven't slept yet. so
Yeah.
I'm still out with this. This was taken at 1 in the morning.
Okay.
So we're still out, and we're, I hate to say tooling around, but I was going around with Erston, and finally I said, I got to get to bed. But he was taking photos, and some of these were new to him, so this would be something he had put on his website.
So their Constitution Day is our 4th of July.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Essentially. So are there lots of celebrations
Yeah, they
and
are,
fireworks,
huge.
and they do stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what day is that?
17th of May.
May.
Yeah,
Okay.
17th of May.
Yep.
And this is now the morning, because Gene and I got up, we ate breakfast, but we knew, what they do is, this is a good representation. Near our Airbnb, very close by, I think I showed you that stairway.
Yes, yes.
We took that stairway up to the school. There was a school behind our Airbnb, not very far away.
Yeah.
10-minute walk. And we knew it was there, and Erston told us they would be meeting. They have what's called children's parades, and that goes back to the 1800s. They began these, I think, 1864.
Mhm.
And the children's parades they have the drum and bugle corps that lead down, and they all join a major parade here in Bergen. And
Huh.
you'll see in a moment, it was really pretty magical. And it happened to be a beautiful day too. This was a spring day. You can see most people, we had,
Pretty
light
day,
jackets.
yeah.
It was a great day. It's similar to, mid-May in Maine on a warm day. We can have cold days in May.
Oh,
we can
absolutely.
we can have warm days. But this is a really warm day. And I'm just guessing mid-60s,
Okay.
that particular day. But it was, a dry day.
Very comfortable.
The other thing is that they have children's parades, so you can see the children gathering and the drum bugle corps, but also it is a day almost with the graduates too. The graduates there, they graduate in May. So a lot of the graduates are marching in these parades too, and they typically had colors. I didn't notice the colors, and I read subsequently that, for red, if you were going into like 4-year colleges or professions, white was, I think, going into business, and green if you were going into technology. So it was kind of signified where you were going to, college or further education.
Okay.
But it was really interesting. So this is the group we followed, and you can see the drum and bugle corps, and they had the colors. And what the women, almost all women have what's called bunad, and they are the traditional dresses, and some of them are handed down through generations, and I've heard that some can cost up to $10,000.
Wow.
Hand woven, they're embroidered. I'll show you in a moment. Erston's wife's dress was from her grandmother, and you can see they came down here, and so we followed them all the way down into town, and so they're going to meet up with the major parade and all the other drum and bugle corps, and which was pretty magical. And this is a good example of the bunads. Here people waiting, and the Norwegian flags all over the place. Waving, and they love the country.
They're pretty patriotic.
Patriotic, and this is a day of, and interesting, I said, it's known for hot dogs, ice cream, and flags, and music and things in the parades, but I think it's almost a song of hot dogs.
I was going to say, sounds fairly American to me,
It
yeah.
does, almost,
Yeah.
ice cream, but you can see here, they're all different sorts of dresses, but they're called the bunad, and sometimes it's different place to place, too. So this is what we're joining. So the children's choir or the drum corps would come down and meet with they would meet up, and they're gonna do a parade through town, but it's all around the bay, you know, so
Yeah.
it's a long parade, and it was, 3 hours long. We didn't stay for all 3 hours, because, you go off and there are restaurants around here, people, sitting down having coffee, having adult beverages, etc. But this was, in Bergen. As you can see, the one thing about Bergen, which I really loved, is it had the feeling of a small town, because you didn't have a lot of large buildings. There were some, not even skyscrapers, and maybe like 6, 7-story buildings in some parts of Bergen, but for the most part, you can see in the background here,
Yeah.
they were, 3, 4-story buildings, 2-story buildings, but it kind of kept the flavor of a small town, and I loved it. We had a great time, and you can see we met with a crowd and to watch, but this, as you can see here, packed, 10, 15 people deep. There were people up on balconies, there's young people, of course, young lads, shouting, "Yay!" and they were enjoying adult beverages.
Oh, of course,
Of course, yeah. And there were all sorts of things. You saw, of course, here, you have old cars, you have the drum and bugle corps, you had, gymnasts, you had dance troops, everything you can imagine.
Oh.
But as you can see, it was a pretty magical day, because it was a beautiful day. It's very festive here. The bagpipes, just bagpipe crew coming through.
Yeah.
But here, there'll be an example here of, there's a school group,
Yeah.
coming through.
Yeah.
And of course, and this is kind of an overview. In fact, Erston, this is his picture taken. He was waiting for us, and we weren't sure where he was. We knew we were there, but we were communicating by phone. And he said there was a restaurant to our right. And he
Okay.
said, "We're at the restaurant, and we'll meet up, after the
Okay.
parade." And so that's where we met. So this was his. He sent to me, and I put it in this here too. So.
Food-wise, what is predominantly? A lot of fish.
A lot of fish. There is different things like fish, cod, of course.
Yeah.
Lamb, mutton.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
stews.
Yeah.
Like fish balls. I mean, like they, make the potatoes. Beef is also in part of it too. Believe it or not, sheep's head. Now, I didn't see sheep's head, but it's a very common thing.
I've heard of it.
Where they, and they serve the sheep's head, half of it, looking at you on a plate. Some people who are maybe squeamish about that.
A little bit, maybe.
Well, it's like when you think of pulled pork. I mean, you think of a roast pig. Sometimes you see the pig on the
Oh
spit.
yeah, of course.
And of course, if you go to something you see pulled pork, you might see it in a pan, all the pulled pork. Well, that came from
Very-
the pig.
And I suppose if you've been used to it for years,
Yes.
no big deal.
It's true.
But
I mean,
for a typical American going on, it might be
Yeah.
kind of a culture shock.
yes. I mean, I looked at it, I didn't see it, but I, see it in photos, because I've heard it's sheep's head, and Erston has eaten it, and I asked him, it's sheep's head. He said, it's very good. And what they do is they char-broil the char on the outside,
Yeah.
toughen it, and then boil it,
Yeah.
so that it's very tender. But some people get it served on the plate, and I don't even want to tell you what some of the favorite parts are, the most delicious. But with sheep's head, you can imagine.
Absolutely.
I'll leave it at that. So,
Okay.
but again, fish, and there are a lot of international cuisine too.
Yeah.
Believe it or not. So you have pizza, hamburgers. When you think of it, like every place else, pizza. So you have that also in Norway too.
Okay.
But I think typical Norwegian dishes. The stews, the breads in the morning, croissants in the morning. Even yogurt, fruit, vegetables. I think they really do eat hearty, but also eat, eat well.
Okay. Yeah.
This is my friend Erston, of course, and
Okay,
his wife
there he is.
Ellen. Yeah, and Ellen, and you can see that was her grandmother's dress, so that was handed down to her.
Pretty.
And they
Colorful.
very beautiful. It was a beautiful dress, and you can see the embroidery, and she has some jewelry that goes with it too. But again, that dress may be well over 100 years old. That it's been handed down the family, and she'll probably hand it down too. It's in Erston, and the men too had some really nice suits. In fact, there's a picture of G and me. I'll explain that one. But again, Norwegian flags, and we had caught up with Erston. We were at the parade, and so we met, had coffee and something light to eat. at this restaurant, which was quite busy, just relax, and then we went on a walking tour. And this is just typical on our walking tour. You could see, again, flying the flags. And as you mentioned, it was similar to our 4th of July, where, the flags, the music, the food, the parades, and this is just part of it, because it extends into the night, which I'll show you and show everybody out there too. This is something that, of course, Erston would take a photo of, but this was a mural on the side of a building. And a lot of times they are, you saw this all over, Bergen and other places too, is a lot of times they're commissioned. Sometimes
Okay.
you have a side of a building that, sometimes old brick and stuff, and so to liven it up. And that's part of the, one of the national forests we went to was Jotunheim, which was the land of the trolls. And of
Yeah.
course, when you think of trolls, you think of, you think of Norwegians and the Vikings. There's a lot of mysticism and a lot of, we think of, even in Bavaria and the Black Forest, you think of all of the tales of the woods and stuff. So that's part of the, the old Norse tales. Is, the
Interesting.
trolls.
They tell it through murals.
Yes, and children, the fact that you can hear, a child, hear the fact that you've got a troll. I don't know what the symbolism of this is, but but it's interesting. It's just very colorful, but it was beautiful. But that was the side of a building. You can see the brick at the stone work there,
Interesting.
and that was probably 20 feet high, and I'm just guessing 20 feet wide.
Very pretty.
Yeah, very pretty.
Very.
Good, beautiful. And this is we saw earlier, I had taken the picture of at night, the night before, so this is still the day, and you can see in the background, these restaurants are completely full. I mean, the outside restaurants, a lot of these were restaurants and shops and things.
How was the pricing? Of course, things have changed quite a bit with the euro and so forth.
Yeah, well,
Things like
the
that.
dollar was still pretty good at that time,
Yeah.
and things like gas, I think were like probably $7 a gallon.
Yeah.
But what you expect, it is even an oil-rich country, but again, we had an economical car too. When we traveled, we were traveling with a smaller car, and but
You don't see many gas guzzlers over there.
no, you don't see many big cars,
No.
there. But because part of the roads, there are a lot of tunnels, and I'll show you later, but a lot of tunnels.
Road's pretty narrow.
Road's pretty narrow,
Yeah,
and so you don't have, you have some highways, but for the most part, you're traveling, especially out in the country and places we went, very narrow. I would say like Route 2, if you're in the Skowhegan area, Route
Yeah.
2. But
Okay.
a lot of times you don't have the wide breakdown lanes, it's,
So if you break down, you got issues.
you got issues, and some of the places we went, I thought we might have issues. We broke down, like, I don't see any cavalry because I didn't see anybody else on the road, so. The evening, and so this was about 6 o'clock at night, and this is the Mont Burson. This was the old stock market
Okay.
exchange, and what they did is converted this, because now the stock market changed in Oslo, but they turned into restaurants and shops, etc. Erston, when he knew we were coming to Norway, we had planned this trip, the 2018 at the end, and so he got reservations in December of 2018 for this day, because as you imagine, there are thousands of people in Bergen and only so many seats at this Mont Burson, which is one of the famous landmarks.
Okay.
And, we were inside. So he had reservations, and I think it was at 5 o'clock or 6 at night. So this is the inside. And this is Herr Walker. Now, I went over it. I have, suits that I have, but when we went to Oman, we were going to the opera. So I happened to go to Goodwill and saw this suit coat for $3. I thought, you know what? No one knows it's a $3 suit coat, so that's what I brought. 'Cause I
Looked
thought-
pretty good.
I know. I thought, well, if your luggage gets lost, you're not losing a suit, and I had black pants. But
Yeah.
in Erston, Ellen gave us the Norwegian to tag on here for part of the spirit of the celebration.
Okay.
So that's Jean and me.
Yeah.
Jean and I. And this is the inside of the restaurant.
Wow.
So the old stock market exchange, but it was beautiful.
Beautiful.
It was really beautiful, and now. Fast forward, but this is just different angles from our seat. I just took different angles of it, but it was pretty exquisite. And again, a varied menu. And there were probably 3 or 4 pages of everything you can imagine. International cuisine. You could probably find things Americana. You could find pizza, but you find.
Yeah.
I don't even remember what we ate,
Ooh.
but it was delicious. And
Oh,
this, of course,
look
the
at
pastry.
this.
Oh yeah, it's like the banker here in Skowhegan.
So they actually have waffles as part
Yeah,
of the interesting. Yeah.
And you can see croissants, but You know, bakeries you find, you know, everywhere, but, you know, for the fair, but I think we ate pretty well. I can't remember if we got anything here or not, but we did later, you know, in the next day.
Ooh.
So
Wow,
what we did is
beautiful.
Ellen wasn't going to stay with us. They have fireworks, and of course, because the sun sets so late, this is still, you know, Constitution Day. As I said, a long day, a variety of things that we've done. Erston, we brought Ellen back, and we went back to our place and changed, you know, into, you know, relaxing clothes because the fireworks are going to begin at 11:15 at night. And we were. I was going to say I want to make
Did
sure.
they expect people to work the next day?
That's a good question. This is Friday, so it was going to
Oh,
Saturday.
going into the
So this
weekend anyways.
this happened to be Friday, but of course May 17th is going to be a revolving holiday. But I have notes here, folks, because a lot of these things are in Norwegian. So it's this is Lily. We're going to be on the lake Lily Lungegardsvannet, and so
Okay.
that's the name of the lake.
Okay.
We'll call it Lake Lily.
Lake Lily.
But this sunset began, we were crossing the bridge from Urson. He was showing us different places, but this started as we were crossing the bridge. And it lasted probably about 40 minutes. It just got more and more beautiful. It was just an amazing sunset.
This is gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. And we walked around because you can see there were food tents and there were, you know, still people in their traditional outfits and, you know, people, you know, taking, of course, pictures. But we found a great spot where they're going to set off fireworks. And so this is the inside lake. This was reclaimed from the sea. What they did is they filled in, you know, a few hundred years ago.
Yeah.
So this is now a freshwater lake. But but this is in several acres inside of Bergen. But you can see the sunset.
Oh,
It was
gorgeous.
It was just gorgeous. And I just picked one here, but we had several pictures and, you know, walked around just taking. But it was a spectacular sunset, which was just a pretext for the fireworks.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. And so the fireworks went off, and it began at 11:15, and it was about a half-hour show, and we weren't far from where they were setting it off, you know. So it was beautiful. Just had a couple, but you know, typical fireworks. Fireworks are fireworks, but it was just the setting. You know, as I said, it was a beautiful night. You know, lakeside with Erston. We had experienced, you know, the day of the parades and going to the Mount Berzen, and just being together was great. And another long day. The next day, so this is the next day. So Gene and I went back up on the funicular to hike, and Erston wasn't here at this point. So we wanted to hike, you know, and we wanted to, you know, hike in there. I asked Erston, I said, "What are some good trails?" He said, "Just park your car and go." And I think the thing in Norway, as you alluded to, is it's such an outdoor country. I mean, you know, sometimes even in winter, like they said, it's almost embarrassing to be inside because people, you know, just take to winter. They you know, thrive on winter too, which you see in the Winter Olympics. You know,
Absolutely.
You think of Lillehammer with, you know, '94.
Yeah.
You know, there's, you know, spectacular skiers and the ice skating and being outside, and so so we wanted to hike, and so we did, and we had a really nice hike, but you know, overlooking here. We took a lot of pictures, but as I said, this is kind of a panorama. But you know, this is, again, you can see a little bit more of Bergen, but you can see the hills. I wouldn't even call them mountains per se, but you know, they're hills, but they're good sized hills, similar to Western Maine. But you can see all the inlets and how they are. It is protected. You can see how the city is kind of like behind the sea, which is nice.
Yeah, gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. And this is where we were. We were here at this point. We sat here. The fireworks were set off here, and that's where we were sitting, right on the grass that night previously. So that just gives you an idea how they reclaimed this, of course, and built around. But this is, you know, how you can see it's somewhat industrial, smaller buildings. But these are some of the highest buildings you saw, you know.
Okay.
And some office buildings. I'm sure there are some. You
Not
know,
a lot of real high rises.
no, I
here,
think,
no.
you know, similar to Portland, you know, you have,
Yeah.
you know, really not even many high rises in Portland.
Yeah.
But, you know, Boston actually doesn't have a lot of sky rises, you know, high rises. You know, you have, you know, the buildings, you know, kind of in the center there, you know,
Yes.
Copley Square and things. But overall, Boston, you know, has a lot of, you know, smaller buildings. But this in the Lofoten, we took off from here. You know, we were going on the next day. So and Gene and I walked around, and you know, of course, we walked around here, and this is a picture of the the day before, we could see the restaurants are a little bit more empty now because, you know, it's a lot of people probably usually
They're tired.
sleep.
They're tired out
They're
from the
tired.
day before.
They're tired out, exactly, you know, and this is,
In their business day, are they? I remember when I went to Spain, they'd stay up really late, have this long meal at night,
yeah,
and the workday didn't really start until like 10 in the morning.
yeah, that I don't know when
Yeah.
it started. That I would have to ask because I didn't inquire about it. But
Yeah.
you know, you're right. A lot of times it does begin at 9 in the morning, and you know,
Yeah.
have breaks and things like that. And
Siesta
don't-
or whatever, maybe not there,
Yeah.
but
no, but I know in Germany a lot of times too, especially the smaller towns, they would close up for lunch because it was the bigger meal. The students come home for an hour and a half or two, and they go back
That's
work till
right.
6 or 7.
that's right.
You know, so this is actually the boat that we were taking. Urston had picked us up, and you know, we're driving us around town to see other spots. So we were with Urston, and we were going to pick up Ellen, and we spent the afternoon, because at night we were able to drop off our luggage. By this time, we were going to be going that night with this, but this is the boat, and it's a cargo ship. So they stopped at those stops I showed you earlier with the you know, cities. And so they had cabin. I think they had 100 passengers. You know, so we were 2 of them, Gene and I. This is Urston's friend, Nam Searle, and an artist, and he was commissioned in a hospital by the Children's Wing, and that is his daughter was the subject. He was a really good artist. It was just really neat seeing him. So they commissioned him to do a mural on the wall here. So he was working, and so we went in, of course, took pictures, and Urston was taking pictures here. But you know, that was his daughter was the model. You know, so
Okay.
but it's just kind of neat of his conception of, you know, to have color and you know, it's just things flowing. But
Rembrandt, he's
oh
got
yeah,
on his, yeah.
very nice man. You know,
Yeah.
and he was a very interesting man. You know, it's just, but it was just, again, it was just fun. You know, because you meet, you know, people, Norwegians in the different walks of life, and
They all spoke pretty good
oh
English.
yeah, his English was excellent. And I don't think, I can't remember if them had come from another country, you know, as
Yeah.
or stemmed from another country, his parents.
Yeah.
So now we're on the Lofoten. Urston had dropped us off kindly because we, you know, instead of having to take a taxi, our luggage was already there. You know, and we picked it up and we got on board. We got to our room, which is a very small room, but you know, we'd be going from place to place, and we'd be on this for about a day and a half. This was taken here at 11:15 at night. Again, the only reason I know it because of the timestamp. I checked it, thinking, what time? So as you can see how light it is. You
Oh,
know,
yeah,
how
still.
light. Yeah. So we're sailing out, but I just wanted to take this because, and I took, you know, I ended up being Captain Kodak, you know, because you could take, you know, I love taking it because as the sun went down, you get, you know, even more beautiful pictures, and but you know, sailing out of the harbor, but it's again gorgeous. So this is the next morning, and this was taken at, I checked again 6:30 in the morning. You know, we had slept, and I get up early. You know, I went up on board, and again, beautiful on board, taking pictures. But as you will see, is like these, you know, we mentioned about fjords. You know, some of them may not be big, but these are all sometimes inlets where
Okay.
they're going among from, you know, different ports, and they had stopped at Malloy,
Okay.
Malloy, and I have to back up here, and Malloy and Floro, and so we were going on board, and so we were going to eat breakfast, but you know, we spent time just looking around because it was so pretty.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know.
for sure.
Yeah, and so we eventually, again, we spent, you know, 2 or 3 hours, you know, traveling through the fjords and then the coast, but we came to what's called Älesund, and that's about halfway to eventually Trondheim. But you can see again in the background, you know, we had sailed, you know, through this area in the coast, and there were 400 steps up to an overlook, and so Älesund, we were here for 2 or 3 hours, so we had a chance to, you know, walk around, eat, but you know, do a little walking, which is nice. But we climbed up here for an overlook of the city. In the picture, you can see how some of these were apartment buildings.
Yeah.
You know, when you think of the hurricane, I don't believe they get hurricanes, but you know, with the rising water, you know,
Oh, my.
you know, ocean. But you know, these are apartments here. You probably don't tell the kids, hey, go play.
Yeah, no.
Or if you don't like someone, maybe say, hey, go out the back door. It's like, but because you could kayak right up to here, but it's but these were apartments in Alesund.
Yeah.
And where we're going north here towards Trondheim, they call these Norwegian Alps, and the Alesund, and this is the Cinnamore Alps, they call these. And then we also went further north, as we're traveling north, to the Molde Panorama, which are 222 snow-covered peaks.
Wow.
And again, I was Captain Kodak. I probably had, 30 pictures of this, but because of time and et cetera, we saw this for, well over an hour. As you're traveling north, you saw Alps, basically
What type of elevation you're talking about for the peaks?
These peaks,
Highest
some were
peaks.
about 8,000 feet.
Okay.
'Cause we went up into the 8,000 feet or so, and it may be even higher because we went up to the Jotunheim, and I'll show you later. Those the two highest mountains in Norway, 8,000 feet. So this may be in between 8,000 feet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
But nothing like 10, 12,000.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things, it was kind of the Hurtigen is one of the main cruise lines, and the ship we traveled with from Trondheim down was this one. We're in the Lofoten still,
Okay.
traveling north. But what I noticed, and I was asking Urson, is these are Norwegians. When they go by, they wave. It's almost like saying hello, And so they're waving their flags. The Norwegians just saying hello, and the other ship, the Hurtigen going south, was waving their flags.
Yeah.
It was really a neat thing. So took a picture of that too. You can see some freighters here. So this is Christianodot, and this is evening. We stopped here for a while, and we're going from this point. We'll be going to our northern point, Trondheim. So we're here, offloading, picking up passengers. And offloading passengers also, because remember the Lofoten, as you're going north, some people are traveling from Bergen to maybe Christianaland, or they're traveling to Trondheim. So we were
Right.
traveling to Trondheim and return. So then they're dropping off cargo, picking up cargo, and so
Good.
that
Beautiful.
was another sunset.
Yeah,
Coming out of
beautiful.
there. So we were there, a couple hours, and then coming out, this was the sunset. And the interesting thing is, believe it or not, the sun had already set. So what's shining you see here is actually up in the clouds. That's shining up into
Up
the clouds.
into the clouds,
Up in the
okay.
clouds, which is interesting. So we're coming up north, and time for me to get to bed. So I did sleep, and this was a bigger boat, the Trondheim. So we're in Trondheim, and so we've reached our northern port. We had to trade ships, so we collected our luggage, left our room, and we're now going to be traveling the Trollfjord, which means the trolls, which are troll fjord,
Okay.
the fjord of the trolls.
Okay.
It's a bigger ship, and so you can imagine more modern. You can see here deck, but you had also, places where you sit, and
Okay.
relax and read. So when you're traveling, you have this beautiful going through the fjords. You have all the windows to look out. You kind of stake out your chair.
Oh yeah, I would
Yeah.
think.
And they also have decks where you sit out on deck. So we had about 2 or 3 hours, changing ships. We could bring our luggage on, but again, the same thing as it wasn't going to be sailing until, can't remember what time we left, but we had a few hours. So Gene and I walked around there, the port of Trondheim. And as we started sail, this is a Navy ship, one of the Norwegian Navy ships, and as you can
It's Navy.
imagine. Yeah, because of not only tensions, but you do border Russia in the north.
You're on
and
the north, yeah.
You've always you're always patrolling the waters for a lot of different things. But as I said, there's a lot of coast to patrol.
They're probably really patrolling right now.
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. Especially where you have pipelines going through and the possibilities of sabotage and
That's right.
yeah. But this is it took this. I only had one picture here, but again, we went for miles and miles. We had showed you the Alps, and we're traveling south. We was going to see similar scenery, but this was just a little bit different because a lot of it was like here. And I'm just guessing these were probably a few hundred, maybe 1,000 feet high. I mean, it's deceiving because a lot of times you can see in the background here that's a town, and above that, you know, you would have, you know, the rocks and cliffs, etc. Sometimes you can climb them, sometimes you couldn't.
Yep.
But it was beautiful.
Ooh,
Um,
spectacular.
and so going on, as we went on, the weather got worse and a little bit rainy. So, you know, as we went through fjords, and it really, I didn't take a lot of pictures. As I said, I culled pictures, but I look a lot like me. You saw
Yeah.
granite. It would be similar to the Casco Bay Islands, truthfully.
Okay,
You know?
okay.
So you couldn't get a long view, but it was amazing because you're going through. But it was beautiful because, you know, you're going through this ship, and, you know, on either side you're going through these, you know, fjords and, you know, the islands, because you're going still, you know, city to city or town to town.
Okay.
And offloading cargo, and we're as I said, we were heading back to Bergen. When we landed in Bergen, we rented a car, and so we took the train to, you know, we went to the airport, got our car at where it was. Actually, the car was at the airport, and so we're heading to Flam.
Okay.
You know, along the way, this is representative. It was kind of a rainy, misty day, and as I mentioned, we were coming on the Trondheim South. That was kind of the weather, but this is a good example. This is just one of the waterfalls, and I mean, we went through tunnel after tunnel. I think 33 tunnels to get to the place, you know, where Flam was at the end of a fjord. But there were just so many waterfalls. It's just amazing, because you can imagine coming off the, you know, if you have any rainy weather, it's just coming off the rock. And a lot of it is stone rock. And,
Yeah. What would the elevation of that?
elevation here, I'm just guessing, you know, 500 feet, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe 1,000 feet.
Pretty
you know?
substantial, though.
So pretty substantial. I like it at the Western Main. You know, it's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
so much peaks, but, you know, some of it you would see peaks, but, you know, some of it just, you know, raw rock. I mean, just, you know, granite rock. And so the next morning we stayed in actually more of a country inn. It was Airbnb, but it was really neat. You know, some of the people you met there, but it was at the end of the fjord, the Sonja Fjord, and we were staying in Flam, but we were having a really another neat day planned. Of course, my wife Jean planned this, Flam, but we wanted to, you know, see the harbor, but there was called a Brekefossen, which is one of the large waterfalls where we were staying, near outside of Flam, and Sherpas had created this, and in Norway they brought Sherpas because, number one, you know, working in the mountains, you know, we all know Sherpas, you know, Mount Everest and Nepal, etc. But
Yeah.
from Nepal, and just reading what I read is it said a Sherpa working for a summer in Norway would earn what they might earn for, you know, 30 years income in Nepal.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so you know, they could send money, you know, for their families, but of course they're just otherworldly. It's known for their strength in their expertise in building these stone steps, and so this was a stone step leading up to the waterfall. You know,
Okay.
it's just, but you look at how huge those rocks are.
Oh, those are.
Oh, it's just amazing.
So
you
how
know.
many Sherpas would be carrying this?
That's a good question. We didn't see any Sherpas, but I've known. They said it in, you know, since that time. I think they began in 2015. This is 2019. And up to 2022, they had something like 300 projects that all over Norway that they had done or were going to do. So, you know, some of them were probably small places. And this wasn't extremely large, but it was beautiful. You know, this is Brekefossen.
Huh.
So we were hiking into the waterfall, and I'll show you the next slide in a moment. But again, there are waterfalls over the place, and this is one that we want to see. You can barely see it, but there's a nice rainbow here because from the mist. You know, it was a beautiful sunny day, thank goodness, and the weather had cleared. Beautiful sunny day, and this was our view. So
Wow.
from Brekefossen, you know, we have the waterfall, but, you know, we're overlooking. This is the end of the fjord. And as we mentioned, you can get an idea what a fjord is. This is one of the arm of the Sonja Fjord.
Okay.
So sometimes it ends at a town, but it, you know, is similar to our tributaries, I suppose, on our rivers. You know,
Sure.
where you have, you know, like we'll say the Dead River flows into the Kennebec. Kennebec flows into the ocean. But the fjord here is, it was actually a ship coming in, and similar to what we traveled with, was come to people, passengers would get on board and travel.
How
Gina,
deep, how deep are those?
that's a good question. You know, 300. I've seen some 300 feet, but I'm sure I don't know where it is here.
So
But,
you could get big ships in there.
oh yeah, these are fairly good cruise ships. You know,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
come in, and
Yeah.
so I'd say they're fairly good deep water.
Yeah.
When we were in the lake fjord, to give an example, in Newfoundland, was 500 feet deep. The glaciers carved that out. So it'd be interesting to check, you know, because we saw several fjords, you know, how deep these are, what it ranges.
Mm-hmm.
You catch me off guard with some of these questions. But some of you at home could check that out.
Yeah,
That's your
yeah.
homework.
Yeah.
But the fjord here ended here, but of course it flowed into the Sonia Fjord, is something like 100 miles long.
Okay.
You know, so it'd be, you know, from Skowhegan, Madison to Portland, long, you know, to reaching the sea. And it has
Okay.
different arms of it also. But you can see where we stayed. We stayed down here, and you know, it's just a lot of farmland. You had
Yeah.
farmland, and you know, and then Gene and I were traveling on. We drove up. This is called the Stegstein, which is like, almost like the climbing rock. And this was a platform that goes 100 feet out over the fjord, but it was 2,000 feet above the fjord. So
Wow.
there's a viewpoint. It was made for that purpose. But of course, the road up was very windy, and you know, it was pretty impressive. But you know, you want to have good brakes.
Oh yeah, I would say.
But you know, it'd be like traveling up to, you know, maybe the top of, you know, halfway up Sugarloaf. But you know, you can imagine our western mountains, you know, halfway, you know, up, climbing up. But this was the view. So from
Ooh.
the platform, that was, you know,
Stunning.
that's what the colors were like too. It was just beautiful. You know, you could see the mirroring of the clouds in the corner. And as the clouds came, sometimes it would darken, sometimes lighten. But we happened to take this picture here, which was, you know,
Stunning.
beautiful. So
Stunning.
it was really stunning. And again, this is, if you traveled with that ship we saw coming in, you know, you'd be traveling, you know, possibly, you know, it's 50, 60 miles through this fjord to
Yeah.
the end point.
Yeah.
And you can travel from point to point. You know, sometimes you could get on as almost a passenger ship. But it was beautiful. And so Gene and I were traveling on, so we're now heading inland because we were going to go into some of the national parks, and this is all the same day. You know, after we hit Trondheim, we the next one went to the Brekefossen, we went to the Stegstein, and now this is called the Lairdale Tunnel, 15 miles long, longest tunnel in the world. We've been some through. When we took our kids trip to Switzerland, we went through the Arlberg Pass, which is about 10 miles.
Yeah.
But most of the time we were able to go up over the Alps, but it depends on. But as you can imagine, instead of making roads going up over the mountains, a lot of times they go through them. And also because of winter and ice and snow and things, it's safer.
Must have taken a long time to build that one.
It took a long time, I'm sure, but you can see even like the walls were just, you know, beautiful, you know, almost a handmade walls here. But what was interesting, which thank goodness, is for some reason I think they were doing some construction, but we had to wait because it was one-way traffic. So they had traffic coming out the other way. We had to wait and then get a signal because we were going to travel 15 miles in the other direction. So I think. And thank goodness, because you know you're traveling, and you could probably imagine like, if you were driving from Madison to Fairfield, you know, or anywhere you can imagine.
Pretty long way.
Floating a long way, you know, 15 miles when you're driving and it's dark, and you're just seeing the lights of the tunnel and the line, of course. After a while, your eyes start going a little crazy.
Yeah, I would, no doubt.
But they do have, you know, they have these exit things too, where you can, you know, get off. An emergency, you know, so there are exits.
Oh, good.
But not a lot of them, but I think emergency exits, etc. So we didn't panic, so there were no breakdowns.
Good, good.
Yeah. This was interesting too. This is called a stave church. We couldn't go in because it was a funeral, but originally these were built between 11 and 1300 all over Norway. And at one time they think there were about 1,000 of these churches. And in the Middle Ages, they were made of wood, and a lot of times they had almost like a tar mixture to, you know, preserve the wood.
Preserve the wood, yeah.
Yeah, but right now there are about 26 left in the country. So you know, a lot of times conservation groups have gotten together, raised funds to.
Those are fascinating
They are
structures.
fascinating. Yeah, we saw 3 stave churches. You know, here, Bogand, and actually 4. And
Okay.
we stayed in another place, Loam, which was a more modern one, but this is one of the more famous one in Borgund. Yeah. So, but
Okay, we're down to the last couple of minutes here.
seriously,
Yeah, yeah. What can we do in a few minutes? Yeah,
talk
let's.
too much.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, we'll whip through these maybe.
Let's do a couple more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me show you. This is a stave church. In the stave, of course, um, because of the pillars, they're made because of the pillars. That was the church, and it was built around that, and then they built the outer walls. Here, we went on the Jotunheimen, we went up into the National Forest, and we had crossed by ferry up in there, and it was about an 80-mile trek. Saw
Okay.
nobody, and we saw one of the national ski teams
Okay.
practicing.
Okay.
This was the next day. We were
Oh,
going
yes,
to
yes.
Gairanga. This was only open 2 days before we got there.
Yeah.
So we were able to go up and see that. It did cloud over, but we were able to see
Glaciers.
this glacier. I mean, and also this fjord. This is the next fjord, Gairanga. We went to the town. We crossed, and towards the end, this was a. There are several. Glaciers that we
Glaciers.
see, and of course, a lot of these glaciers are receding because of climate
Oh,
change.
yes.
So we saw several, and
Yeah.
so we saw the glaciers here, Chris, and our last city was Vesavogen before we're heading back to Bergen. Climbed up here. That was a beautiful morning driving out because of mirror on the lake. This is back in Bergen now. We're back with Ersten. This was taken across the bay of the old city.
Yeah.
And this was the last night. And he was able to control. He was able to put his phone over here, and he got me laughing. And we were literally, we had a great time. That was our last evening together. That was our group photo, and that ended our trip. The next morning, we flew out.
You know, as usual, Mike, we try to pack it all in, and
Yeah.
you and I get going back and forth, and sometimes we
Yeah.
forget the time, but still an amazing adventure that you had, and as you said, it does take a lot of work to prepare for this show,
Right.
and I really appreciate your doing it. And we do, I had said this pre-pandemic, we do want to have you on at least once a year.
We'll have
with
a clock here next time. You know, I saw you look at your watch. I had no clue.
No, I probably should have given you the high sign. a
That's
little
okay.
early. But yeah, pre-pandemic we
Yeah.
had said once
Yep.
a year, and let's have no more pandemics, and let's
Yeah.
go back to once a year. But this is absolutely fascinating. I appreciate your coming on again. And this is Mike Walker, and
Yeah.
I'm Chris Perkins, and now you know.